Welcome to Coach Bennett's podcast, where every run has a purpose, where kindness is hardcore, where this is about running, and this is not about running, where every starting line is a finish line in disguise, where rambling still gets you where you need to be, where pineapple will never ruin your pizza, and the sodas, adult and not adult kind, are always cold, and where there is room on the starting line for everybody. I'm Coach Bennett. Thank you for letting me be a part of your day. Let's get started. Welcome to episode 67 of Coach Bennett's podcast, and this is going to be a fun one, not just because it's about making running fun, it's also because we've got a guest. That's right, we've got back in the booth, even though it's not a booth, Coach Tammy Bennett. That's right, mental performance coach extraordinaire. You know her as Coach Bennett the Greater. I know her actually as Coach Bennett the Greater. And we've got a great episode. And the reason why we're doing this episode now is because of the time of the year. We've got people coming back to school. We've got parents having their kids go back to school. So we've got team stuff starting back up. We've got fall marathon season is in full swing. And a lot of people are working hard and they want their running to be fun or fun again. So what better time to do this than now? So welcome back to the show, Coach Bennett.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I hope so. We're happy that you're here. I'm happy that you said yes. And I've got a question, the first one, which you can take it any way you want because the floor is going to be yours. But I don't know if I've ever asked you on this show to tell a little bit about your background as a runner, because you've basically been a lifelong runner. So I think it would be great for everyone to hear about how you got started in this sport. And then if you could transition to how you got into coaching, I think that would be a great way to kick off the show.
Okay, I'll try to keep this from being really, really long. So I started running around age 9 or 10. My grandpa was a good runner for University of Wisconsin. He was a Big Ten champ, by the way, in 1944. I did not know that at the time. I just knew that he was going to a fun run and I wanted to do it with him. And I did a mile fun run. I really enjoyed it. I used to time myself for fun, running laps around him and my grandma's orchard. They had a 7-acre apple orchard, and I thought it was really fun to just go out and run laps and have them time me and try to beat the time. So I absolutely loved running. And then it turned into, I was kind of good at it, and my dad became my coach and coached me in ways that I think I would never use. And so over the years, between the age of 9 or 10 when I started, I ran through middle school. I did some junior Olympic national events. I ran through high school, and I ran at the University of North Carolina. Go Heels! That's where we met. And then I ran for a very brief time for the Nike farm team. And from that age of 9 or 10, a lot of years in there, it became not fun. And, for a lot of different reasons, but it's a weird thing. Running saved my life in a lot of ways. And it also was a really hard part of my life in a lot of ways. But isn't that kind of true for running for a lot of people? It's like a love, sometimes not love kind of relationship. But because of my experience with loving it and also not loving it, it made me want to be a coach, especially when our kids started running. It made me want to be a coach to them, the coach that I didn't get to have, and the coach that I always wanted, and the coach that appreciates the sport for being something beautiful. And I really wanted to teach people that running is the best sport on earth, and it's something to be loved. It's something that can be really fun. It's something that can be hard and fun at the same time. So that's how I thought about running, and that's how I became a coach, is because I wanted our kids to experience running in the way that I did when it was that love relationship, right? So I wanted it to be a really good place for them to have fun and grow. And so far we've done that.
It's interesting because I didn't plan it this way, I promise. But your story is almost like an encapsulation of what I hope this episode is, because you started in the sport, which I think is hilarious. I don't know if you've ever phrased it that way, or if you did, maybe I didn't notice that the first run you wanted to go to was a fun run that your
Mm-hmm.
grandpa was going to? And what an interesting name, because if he was going to do, let's say, a 5K race, and it was presented as an intense competition, maybe at the age of 9, you're like, I don't know if I want to go do this. But the fact that in your head, it was referred to as a fun run and your grandpa was going, there was something about it that made you think, ooh, this sounds fun. And you wanted to go. And then you started running around the apple orchard, timing it, finding some joy in like competing against yourself. And then as time went on, that original kind of, beautiful aspect of it went away. And I want to know what maybe about that first part was so engaging. So you went to the run and then you wanted to run around the apple orchard, but what was it that was fun to you? What made it exciting as something that you wanted to do?
That's a good question. I've never really actually thought about it. Um, I think it was something about the social aspect of just being in a crowd of everybody kind of doing the same thing. I think at a young age, running is fun. We're chasing people or we're being chased, but in this fun, giddy way, when we're playing tag and hide and seek and it's a game to try to maybe see how many people you can beat. I had fun passing people and they were bigger and taller than me. There was also part of it that was magical with my grandpa and I and warming up together and talking about, who knows what on the way there and on the way home. And I think there was also the physical exhilaration of just kind of pushing my body for a bit and just, I guess the runner's high that people talk about afterwards. I think it was a combo of all those.
Well, then why, knowing what your initial introduction was, okay, to running and how impactful it was. And really, I think it was so impactful that maybe it was the doorway back into the sport later on when you had gone through some rough patches where the sport really wasn't enjoyable. It wasn't fun for you for a number of different reasons. Why do you think that some people's initial introduction to the sport isn't like yours? Like, we can see where yours went, in the right direction. You're with your grandpa, the environment was fun, it was relaxed, it was supportive. Well, let's talk about the people who get that introduction and it doesn't go right. Why do you think some people have a bad first impression of running?
I think because we're introduced to it maybe in PE class, where there is no guidance on how to run. We're just told to go run some laps. And, kids being kids, there's going to be a lot of kids that take it out incredibly fast and it's a full on sprint. And other kids that aren't really capable of doing that, they don't have the fitness level for whatever reason. And for them, it's really hard and it's not fun to be the last one that finishes in PE class. I think the other big thing is it's that running is a punishment, right? If you don't do this, you're going to go run some laps or go run some laps and cool it off. It's not phrased as something to do for fun. It's phrased as something to do to punish, or that's not fun, or it's expected not to be fun. It's something that you have to do if things didn't go right. So, it's kind of hard to fall in love with something that's given to you as a punishment.
Yeah, and what about the idea, because you kind of hinted at it right there about, finishing last in PE class, how that element is introduced. Because if you go back to your story, you're at a fun run. I think one of the best parts about those, Saturday kind of fun run atmosphere, um, vibes that you get is you can kind of get lost in the crowd in a really good way,
Mm-hmm.
that no one's really paying attention to how many people you beat and how many people beat you, and it's just you're out there and it's fun, and like you said, that you're kind of doing something together with the crowd as opposed to against. And how do you think that plays a part in that experience as opposed to, use the PE again as an example, where it's, you know go run the mile, with 10 or 12, of your classmates, or 20 of your classmates. There is no, there's no thought being put into, well, who's been running or who's been playing soccer, or whose first run is this, and everyone just goes out and suddenly the competition can actually be a negative.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, you're telling kids to go out and do something that they've never trained for necessarily, or, most just general kids at the age of 9 haven't been training and running. Um, and so you're just throwing them out and saying, here, go do this thing that you've never trained for, you've never practiced for. There's no context to it. You don't know what times mean, you don't know what pace means. And yet you're being compared to people of your age that are finishing ahead of you. And at a certain age, uh, your athletic prowess is a big part of your popularity or your clout. Um, there's been studies that show like at certain ages it becomes way more important. And so if you're the one finishing, 30 seconds behind the next to the last kid, that can feel really hard and your clout is kind of going down, down, down in front of your eyes. And it's not your fault. You've just never been taught how to run it. You've never trained for it. And I just think it's so unfair and it makes it, why does that kid want to come back out and try to run again?
I love that you just said that because that was going to be my next question was if the sport's introduced to you that way, and this is a sport where it really is about consistency over the long term, um, what kind of a part do you think that plays with people kind of banishing themselves from the sport because of just that first interaction of, well, I couldn't do it the first time. I don't ever want to experience that again. I'm not coming back. Do you think that plays a part in a lot of people just not giving it a chance for, maybe forever?
100%. And it's why, when you're at the grocery store at the checkout and, somehow it comes up that you're a runner, they're like, oh, I hate running. I'm bad at running. And it's like, when was the last time you actually tried though? It's probably from back in, middle school days in PE class. And you told yourself that you weren't a runner, or your gym teacher told you that you weren't a runner,
Yeah.
and you've never questioned that belief. And
Yeah,
that's a shame.
absolutely. Now, if you fast forward to that person that's, let's say, 25, 35, 45, 55, it doesn't really matter. Why do you think their experiences with running aren't that same kind of fun, happy vibe that 9-year-old Tammy experienced? Like, what do you think we do as adults when we reintroduce ourselves to the sport to self-sabotage our relationship with running?
First of all, I think it comes from hundreds of conversations that you've had in those few decades of hearing that running isn't fun. Running is so hard. Oh my God, I can never be a runner. I don't know how those runners do it. So I think it's just sort of synonymous with non-runners or people who don't appreciate the sport. I think running is synonymous with pain, uh, not able to do it, boredom, fatigue, things that aren't that fun, right? So I think when you're going into a sport thinking that it's not fun, I mean, chances are it's not going to feel very fun.
What do you think adults do when, let's say, maybe they're giving the sport another chance for whatever reason? What types of things do we do as adults to self-sabotage the sport or the enjoyment of the sport that we could potentially have? Like
Yeah.
it could be the expectations on ourselves or the expectations on the sport, or you just kind of hinted at the fact that, we've spent a long time telling ourselves we're not going to like it. That's a lot to overcome. But what else do you see as kind of those main things to look out for someone who might be new to the sport or be trying to get someone to come to the starting line?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with the expectations that we put on ourselves. So I think one big one is we think that we're not a runner until we've run a marathon. And I'm going to call BS on that right now. I think that also we tell ourselves that we're not a runner if we're not fast. And it's really interesting because nobody really has a definition for what fast means.
Yeah.
Like I'm sure that you've talked to people that are like, oh, I'm a runner, but I just run slow. I'm not fast. And you're like, well, what do you consider to be a fast runner? And it's not like there's this magical time that if you do it, then you're considered a runner. But if you're
Yeah.
slower, you're not. So I think that we set up these kind of false expectations that aren't really, they're just so arbitrary. We have to be fast and we have to be a marathoner in order to call ourselves a runner or to feel like we belong in the sport. And it's just, that's BS on both of those.
And what do you think about people who, you see, I think part of the reason why people don't enjoy running is because of the expectations they put on running that come from why they start running. Because I always think
Oh
that a
yeah,
lot
yeah,
of
yeah.
adults don't start running from a good place. There are people, and I've had conversations with people that say, I want to get back into playing like tennis again. And you're like, why? You're like, well, because I love tennis, or I want to, get together with some friends, or it could be like pick up basketball. But it's usually when someone says I got to start running again, it's from a pretty bad place as opposed to a positive place. Do you think that plays a part as well?
It's such a good point. And I think you're hinting at that people often go into it for a different body shape or size
Yeah.
that they're trying to attain from running. And I think, yeah, it's really hard to have fun and enjoy a sport when you're doing it to become something that that you don't think you currently are. Um,
Exactly.
or it's because you're not good enough as you are right now and you have
Yep.
to fix or change yourself.
Yep.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to enjoy it when it's a uh I don't know the right word, when you're seeing the sport as a save isn't the right word, but remedy,
Yeah.
a
No, I
remedy for
think
your
I
brokenness.
yeah. No, I think both of those words work. And I think that's a very difficult place to enjoy the sport when you're on the starting line and you're in a dark place. I always say that there's certain times of the year where people, just the numbers of people, increase dramatically in terms of trying to start running. One is the beginning of the new year, because it has to
Yep.
do with the resolution. And the other one is when spring starts, and that's in anticipation of summer. And if you dig a little bit deeper or pull the thread back a little bit more, the resolution isn't, I want to have fun running. It's usually, I hate myself. I don't like myself. It's a negative, nasty voice that's saying I need to start running. Not because I even want to get healthier. It's I just I don't like myself. Or, and that's the same conversation in the spring, considering the fact that, these are substantial life changes people want to make sometimes. Because if you do strip away the bad stuff and you get to, like, you want to be healthier, you want to be stronger, you want to get fitter, like all that stuff, you want to increase confidence. This takes time. How does that also play a part in running and robbing maybe some of the joy and the fun from running?
Yeah. So let's say if you get into running to change your body size or shape and you go for a run, you're probably not going to look much different after that one run, right? But us
Exactly.
humans, we want to see those immediate results, right? We want to see, like, if you went to the gym and started throwing free throws, your percentage by the end of practice is probably going to be a little bit better than when you first got into the gym, right? So you're going to see a little bit more immediate results. But with running, we got to play the long game here, and it's consistency over time. You're not going to all of a sudden change your body composition after one run or even after a week of runs. And so I think it can be, if we're doing it for that reason, to change what we look like, and we don't see these immediate results, and it's like, you just suffered for what? Kind of stinks.
Yeah. And that leads me to the next question, because you just brought up free throw shooting, which warmed my heart because that's one of my favorite things to do is shoot free throws. And you are right. By the end, I'm always better than at the beginning. So there is some immediate gratification if you're practicing free throws. Anybody out there, just try it.
Mm-hmm.
What is different though about running? Does it really go back to how it's introduced? Because something like basketball, people don't put the same expectations on basketball or playing tennis or playing soccer, sorry, global football. The expectations that get thrown on running are so different than the expectations that get put on other sports. So the anxiety and the stress associated with it is so much higher. Why is that?
What do you think?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the coaching and how the sport is presented. I think it also goes into some of what you were saying earlier, the idea of punishment. And I think of the fact that when you're in a non-running environment, something like PE, and the sport is introduced, it's not even introduced as a sport, it's introduced as like a test or an exam. So you're either good or you're not. There is no idea that, your effort counts for anything. There is no idea that, like, we're going to progress and potentially get better. There's none of that. The other sports, there's always that. If a new sport or game is introduced in PE class or anywhere else in life, the assumption is you're going to be terrible when you first start, and you're going to get better the more time you put into it. Running, I think it's very black and white sometimes. And when it gets introduced to kids or adults, it's like, well, if you struggle today, that's because you suck, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to you were working at getting better. Just like you double dribbled 47 times as a 7-year-old at your first basketball practice. No one says you're never going to be a basketball player. They say, tomorrow we're going to work on dribbling.
Right.
Like, so I just think some of it is that. I just didn't know, if one, if you agree with that, and two, like, what else makes running just so different when people think about it, when they're, in relation to or in comparison to a different sport.
So I think one thing is, running doesn't use any equipment. Almost every other sport has some kind of equipment, right? We have balls or things that we're using besides just our bodies. And so I think that us humans have a little bit of this faulty logic that if we have this body that's able to walk and to run from, pretty much the moment we're a year old, that we should be able to just go out and run. And that we forget that running takes a lot of different skills that we need to practice over and over in order to get better. So just like in basketball, you are practicing dribbling and passing and layups and all the things. With running, we don't see that we actually do have a lot of things that we need to practice, but we have things to practice like hills and speed work and form and, recovery runs. We actually do have things to practice, but we don't see it that way because it's not like a common drill or skill that we use in PE class. It's like you're running fast or you don't. And we don't see that there is that middle ground and that build up that takes a lot of time. So I think that's a big part of it.
I love that because I'll tell you what, it's you presented it in a way that I never really thought about, where if you break down all the other sports, I mean, just pick one. You could say,
Let's do
uh,
baseball.
all right, we'll do baseball. Outstanding. There are some people that thrive at hitting, and that's fantastic. And they've got their spot, but they may be terrible in the field, or they may not be able to pitch, which is okay. And there's a place for them. There are some people that are really agile and they could be a shortstop. They're quick. They've got a good arm, but there are others that maybe the arm isn't so strong. So you know what? You're at first base. Like there's a place for so many different types of athletes and different types of strengths. And as a result, I think there's room or grace for struggling in these sports. It's the same thing as like you could pick, global football. There are different positions there. There are different positions that are going to accentuate different strengths and kind of hide other weaknesses. In running, when it's presented early on at a young age, it is like you either can do it or you can't. You're either good or you're bad. You're either a runner or you're not a runner. And that's so not just wrong, it's just unfair to the sport because it's just not true. I mean, and I guess that's maybe something that I wanted to touch upon before we get into some ways to make running fun. You spent so many years teaching kids how to run and enjoy the sport. And being, the beneficiary of some of that, because I coached high school. So a lot of your athletes I ended up coaching after you had taken them through eighth grade. You had some of these athletes that when they first came to you in, let's say, third grade, if this was a black and white kind of world in running where you're good and you're not good, these athletes would not have made it to high school to run and really thrive. So how did you introduce the sport that gave those kids room where you're not the fastest kid, you're not the fifth fastest kid, you're not the 10th fastest kid? What did you do that gave them the room to say, I have a future in this sport? So 5 years, 7 years, 10 years down the road, they were still running and still getting better.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the formula is something like this. If you have fun doing something, you're going to want to keep doing it. And if you keep doing something, you're going to get better at it. Facts, right? So then you got to start at the beginning. How do you make it fun then? And what I always try to do with these kids is it feels really fun to feel accomplished. It feels fun to achieve something. It feels fun to complete something. So, what I would do is I would give them workouts that they could do that challenged them, but I knew that they could do them. So, at the end of the practice, they're feeling like they just did something big and they did something hard. And I was able to individualize it a little bit to different groups so that each group was having something that was both a challenge, but also something that they could achieve. And when you're leaving practice feeling better than you did when you came in, maybe not physically, they're tired, right? Don't get me
Hmm.
wrong. But when you're leaving practice feeling like, holy crap, I just did that, you're going to want to come back because you feel really good. And guess what? If you come back every time there's practice, year after year, day after day, whatever it is, you're going to get better. It's just a fact. Generally speaking, the more you show up, the better you're going to get. So how do you make it fun to show up? You find ways to feel accomplishment and challenged and uh, complete.
Well, let me ask you about something that you just brought up. You brought up how you would individualize, for the groups. So, because I think that's one of the keys to all of this is that idea of like personalizing it or making it, finding out that kid's story for the workout so they have something that they can go home with, like you said, to feel accomplished. Because I think that's also one of the ways that running gets screwed up for people is they're comparing themselves to either a version of them that doesn't exist anymore or a version
Hmm.
of them that does not exist yet or to other people. How important was it for you working with kids to make sure they all knew that they themselves personally had the potential for success every single day and to focus on themselves? Not just, I mean, they all focused on the team, but how important was it for you to make sure that they had at least that distinction in their head? Like, part of today is about me getting better, me, myself getting better.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think a lot of that comes from dialogue and just conversations. How are you feeling? What do you feel like doing today? I would separate them into groups kind of according to their current ability so that they were running with people that are about the same pace. And I also made it such a big deal that time isn't everything. So if I had a group that was running a slower pace than a faster group, that slower pace group doesn't feel less than. They just know these are the times we're trying to hit on this day, and that's all that mattered. And so instead of comparing themselves to this faster group, they're not worried about that. They're just worried about what are our times that we're trying to hit? Let's see if we can do that. Can we do one more? That kind of fun thing. And so I just didn't allow room for comparison. I didn't allow room for time equaling worth or value. It was all about celebrating the effort and celebrating that they were trying. And again, when you feel good, you feel like you tried something, you're going to want to come back.
Yeah, I think that's so unbelievably important. And I can speak from my own past running that it's really hard sometimes to not compare yourself to other people and to not pay attention to other people's times. I mean, I can give an example. When I was running for Nike, so this isn't when I was 14, this is when I was like 22.
Mm-hmm.
And I showed up at practice, and I remember I had run a halfway decent race, but the coach at the time, Jeff Johnson, who's a great man, as you know, he wouldn't update my splits. He said, "Well, we're going to give you some time to kind of just settle into this, new fitness before we start giving you faster splits." And it just so happened that that day was a really high volume day on the track. And I think we had to do something like 2 by 3K. It doesn't really matter, but there was one of the intervals was a lot of laps. And my goal times for the workout were so slow compared to the other guys that I did the math. I should have been lapped on the last lap of the interval in
Mm-hmm.
practice. And for me, rather than thinking these are the right times for me, I was so self conscious about they're going to lap me. That means I'm not good. And Jeff actually had to take me aside and say, the reason why I'm giving you these times is because I really want you to progress and not be stupid. And I don't want you to rush things. And he broke it down. And like you said, he explained it to me. It was that dialogue because he could tell I was kind of embarrassed, but he flipped it and said, no, this is exactly what you need to be doing. And you're going to get to where you want to be if you can be confident in the training that we're doing and not focusing on the wrong things, these silly things. And it made a world of difference for me. But I was 22. I had run in college, and it was really hard for me to figure out something that I hadn't really been taught because I had been equated basically like if you're fast, you're good. If you're getting lapped, that's not good. And yeah, I didn't learn that lesson until I was 22, and you were teaching kids that at 12. So
Well, I mean, and look, it's human nature, right? To want to compare ourselves to other people. I mean, if we want to go way back into primal times, if we were faster than the people next to us, then the tiger wasn't going to eat us; it was going to eat our friends. So let's make sure we're
saber-toothed
faster.
tiger.
There
Is
we
that what you were
go.
going for? The
Right?
saber-toothed tiger? I saw you
Yes.
reaching for some type of animal from prehistoric times.
Yeah, let's go with saber-tooth tiger.
Yeah.
Right. But so it makes sense that we are looking at ways to compare ourselves and to see, like, are we going to be the one eaten or are we going to be the one that escapes? Right. And so it is something that we kind of have to teach ourselves and just have to practice over and over, having faith in the process and trusting, like, in big picture, it's better if I don't make huge jumps now, maybe, in order to make big jumps in the big picture.
Okay, I'm going to jump into a couple of kind of rapid fire questions for you here. Okay.
Let's do it.
So this
Let's
is,
do
I
it.
want you to You answer it any way you want. And so the first one, why and do this from a coaching perspective or an athlete perspective first. You decide.
Okay.
Why should running be fun?
Okay. From an athlete, I mean, you know what? I think it's the same. And it's sort of what I already said. If it's fun, you're going to keep doing it. And if you keep doing it, you're going to get better. So if your goal is to get better, then your goal should be, how do I make this more fun?
Okay. Can hard and challenging be fun?
Absolutely. And I think that is the key. So I think a lot of times, me and you have both actually had this question asked to us when we've been speakers. I think when we were in Naperville, it got asked. And when we were at the Outpost Running, which is a great store in Little Silver, New Jersey, by the way, we were asked about. I think people get the wrong idea that when we talk about running being fun, that we mean like, la, 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 this is amazing. This is so fun. I'm not even breathing hard. And it's like, no, when we say fun, we actually mean that it is fun to be challenged and it is fun for us to get our bodies to do something that we didn't know that they could do. It's fun to question and test our limits. To me, that is what I mean when I say fun, that it is in itself, the challenge and overcoming it is really fun. So, yes, it is
Okay. I
imperative,
agree.
actually.
I agree completely. And I think, like you said, I think it's the same concept for a coach or for an athlete. And we've said this repeatedly that, if you're running if you think that running always has to be serious, then you're never going to get anywhere close to what you could potentially do. It's a hard sport, and it's too hard of a sport for it not to be fun.
Yep.
But let me ask you about those inevitable periods where it's just a struggle. So it's not even a question of, are we doing a hard workout today? Are we trying to challenge ourselves? It could be low motivation. It could be lack of inspiration. It could just be week 7 of raining in Portland and running just doesn't seem fun. Is that okay too?
Absolutely. I say embrace the suck. I think it's even fun to moan and groan out loud about how bad this sucks. There's been times when we've gone running in freezing cold rain that feels like needles on your face, and we're like, "Oh my god, this hurts so bad." I mean, I think one of my favorite runs ever was with our daughter and her friend. They were probably 10 years old, and we were running at a local nature park, and it started hailing like crazy. I mean, it hurt so bad. It felt like we were being cut by 1,000 needles, and we were screaming and laughing so hard because just the agony of it. But there was something so fun about us embracing it and saying, "This sucks. Oh my God, this is awful. Oh my God." But just embracing the pain of it, I think, can actually bring a little element of fun to how bad it sucks. And I think one other thing that I've done too is I've told myself and I've told my athletes this is why race day is going to be so much more fun. Or this moment here when we're running in wind that feels like we're not moving at all or we're moving backwards. This is why race day is going to be so fun, because we just did this really sucky part. Right. And so I think just reminding yourself this pain and agony and boredom and tedium and discomfort that I'm going through right now, this is what makes me be a champion. And whatever champion means to you, it doesn't mean you have to win the race, but this is why I'm a champion, and just embracing that you're a person who does really hard shit. It's really powerful.
Yeah, I know. I think that's great. And I love the acknowledgement that yes, sometimes it's going to suck.
Yeah.
But I also think, it's also important to, be honest as a coach, but also as an athlete that um, there's this stuff that surrounds everything that's fun that sometimes sucks. I was just thinking about I like seeing live music. Standing in line waiting to get in sucks. Standing in line waiting for the bathroom sucks. Sometimes, the concert is 3 hours long and you've got general admission and your legs start killing. That sucks, and you're suddenly like, I should have gotten a seat. Sometimes you get a seat and the people, behind you are mad that you're standing up. That sucks. But this is stuff that, you don't often equate with the concert because you say, oh, I love live music, but all of this is a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
not just, you get to go there and you're sitting on a cloud listening to, Pearl Jam, by the way. Everyone should listen to Pearl Jam, by the way. But I think we sometimes and that goes back into like running. I think running gets unfairly criticized by people because they've had a bad relationship with it, where they think, well, since it's not always 100% fun,
Mm-hmm.
since it's a struggle sometimes, since it's hard sometimes, it must suck. And when you ask them, like, playing tennis on a 90-degree day, that's not easy. You know what I mean? Like the soreness from going back and forth. Remember, I haven't played in so long, but like 20 years ago, I hadn't played in a while. I remember I had blisters on my hands from playing tennis for like an hour and a half. Like,
Oh yeah.
but I knew if I was going to play, I was going to have to go through some blisters and whatnot. But why, again, does he think it just goes back to that initial relationship with running or how some people blast it or how it's presented that again, running kind of gets unfairly cast as, too hard, too difficult, not fun, boring.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think it's that mindset, and it's really hard to overcome that. It's hard to enjoy something that you're telling yourself sucks, right? Who wants to go out the door and go do something that sucks? Kind of no one. So just watch how you're talking to yourself about it. But I think the other thing that's so important is why you're such a good coach to a lot of people is they've been taught to run the wrong way. So if you think that running is going out the door and running as hard as you can and being upset that you can only do it for a matter of minutes, then yeah, running is going to suck for you because you're not doing it the right way, where you're warming up and you're easing into it and you're increasing your pace and you're building up gradually over the weeks. So I think some of it is that mindset part and some of it is just the practical logistics part, that people are just going about it in the wrong way.
And what about the like diversity within running, which I think, like to your point right there, if you're only running hard from the gun every single time, it's going to suck because you're not going to get to go as far as you want. You're going to be hurting very, very early. I always appreciated when you had those young kids, how you kind of introduced so many different parts of the sport. Like sometimes they were running really fast, and sometimes they were kind of running easy, and sometimes you'd have them do a time trial, and sometimes you'd have them do hills, and sometimes they were on the track, and sometimes you would have them playing a game where it was kind of a little bit like tag and they were running around. How important is it to keep running fun, to keep running mixed up?
Yeah, I think it's so important. So I'll use an example from the days where my running was not fun. So there was a local race. I grew up in North Carolina. The Charlotte Observer was a big 10K, and I think it was also a marathon. But my goal was to run the 10K and to break the state record. I think I was 11 at this point. And so my dad who was my coach and didn't know anything about running, was like, oh, okay, well, if you want to break the record in the 10K, then we should go try to break the record of the 10K on the track every day. So every day after school, we went
That's
to a
awful.
track. I mean, how miserable is this? A
That's
10K is
awful.
25 laps around the track, friends. Okay. So we would go to the track and he would time me to try to run 25 laps in this record setting pace. I never was able to do it because, like, all by myself as an 11-year-old trying to run this like state record time, 25 laps around the track, not going to happen. We are not setting ourselves up for success. That wasn't fun. That was the only thing we did day in, day out for months. Not fun
It's
on the
awful.
right. But if you're having some runs where it's a recovery run or some as a hill or some as a speed workout, absolutely this can mix it up and just, your brain likes a little bit of variety sometimes. So it helps it be more fun. I think adding in a destination run can be really fun. I like to run to the library, or now on the days that I walk, but having a place to go to get you out of the door and then you get there and then you have to get home. I think there's so many ways to mix it up and make it more fun. But yeah, don't do the same thing every time.
No,
Don't do it.
no. And just for the record, I mean, I don't think I ran 10,000 meters in a row until well into high school. I would guess, I mean, that's just
Well, let me
you
let,
were
let me correct
crazy.
you. Let me correct what I was saying. I didn't usually complete it because, I mean, this is going into like how to be a terrible, terrible coach. But let's say I would go through the mile or, 2 miles into it and I was off pace. He would like, forget it, we're going home. So I didn't complete the whole 10K on almost any of those days, but it was
Gotcha.
the thought, we're going here to run 25 laps at, like, it was sub
Hmm.
6 minute pace or something crazy at that time. So
Well, not to talk about your 10Ks, but you brought up something really interesting though too. And you said like here's a period where running wasn't fun, and you brought up the monotony of it, but also that aspect of failing, every day failing, where I have to imagine that also played a part in how you coached and how you realized, because you've mentioned it already today, how important it was for you to make sure these kids knew that they were accomplishing something. Well, just fast forward to as an adult how difficult it would be to consistently run if every run you're doing, you're finding some reason to refer to it as a failure, whether it was, I couldn't do what I used to be able to do, or I wanted to go further, I wanted to go faster, or three people passed me that were strangers, and I'm going to equate myself with failure. How how devastating is it from a running perspective, from a coaching perspective? Because I think sometimes people look at this as, if the athlete's thinking, oh, it's just because I'm a weak athlete. But from you as a coach, if you knew that you had an athlete that was constantly deeming themselves a failure on every run, how likely do you think they're going to reach their potential?
There is 0%. There is 0% chance that they are going to reach their potential if they can only find negative things to say about themselves. Just fact. I don't even need to explain anymore. I'm going to drop the mic and walk out. That's emphatic.
All right, well then let's just start there. For somebody out there who's thinking, wow, running can be fun. And now they just pause for a second because it sounds like we just described them as someone who's constantly belittling themselves or diminishing what they're doing or referring themselves, as a failure or someone who sucks at running. What would your advice be for this next run? How to approach it, and then how to deal with, let's say, that part of the run where suddenly they're about to go into attack mode on themselves?
Yeah, I think the first step is awareness. So you're just going to be aware of when your brain starts to be a jerk to yourself. Okay. Now, this is crucial. Do not double down and get mad at your brain for giving you a negative thought. This is crucial. Just notice it and go, my brain's being kind of a jerk right now. And then decide on a different thing to tell yourself that feels true, but also feels better. So we have to make sure that at first you're not doubling down and making yourself be a problem that you had a negative thought. So I don't want to hear you say, why am I always so negative? Why can't I be positive? Why do I always get, down in the dumps? We're not doing that. We're just going to go, oh, I see my brain's being negative again. But instead of it telling me that I'm not any faster, that I'm so slow, I'm going to notice, hey, you know what? I ran farther before I got tired or today, or before I got tired, right? Or I actually ran that hill and it was way easier than it was last week. That no matter what, you're going to find something that makes you feel good and also feels true. And I promise you this, there is always something that you can find to say about yourself that feels true and that feels good. Always.
That's great because I imagine some people would say there's always something that I can belittle myself about. But what a wonderful thing to know. Like, okay, well, there's also something that you can say about yourself, like you said, that is true and maybe motivating and powerful. And from a coaching perspective, again, or maybe from an athlete's perspective, now what happens? So you normally beat yourself up or
Mm-hmm.
belittle yourself, and you said, okay, that's a thought, but I'm going to go in a different direction.
Mm-hmm.
Like now, what happens?
Now you're going to feel better. You're going to finish the run feeling a little bit better. And now here's the tricky part that a lot of people don't get, it's a practice. You are going to have to be aware of the negative thoughts and choose differently a million times. You got to be willing to a million times hear the negative thought come in, not pay attention, choose a different one over and over and over and over and over. Talking about the skills that you have to develop as a runner. And I was saying, the speed workout or the hills, one of the skills that you absolutely have to develop as a runner is that mental awareness of seeing the negative thought come in and then choosing otherwise.
Well, and I think we saw that when we commented on it all summer during the Olympics, that we
Yes.
saw more athletes engaging with themselves, sometimes out loud, but a lot of times it would be in post event interviews where they would be asked a question and they would talk about some doubts they had. And then they would talk about what they would say to themselves, this kind of like positive reinforcement or this
Mm-hmm.
better teammate inside. And I think it goes without saying this was the highest quality Olympics in terms of performances we've ever seen. I don't think that those are mutually exclusive. I think they worked in tandem. But the other thing that we both mentioned, and I want to know if you think this is a coincidence or not, which I don't think you're going to say it was, but I don't want to answer for you.
You're
We
biasing
heard
my answer.
I a little bit, but we heard the word fun used
Yeah.
more than ever at this Olympics by the athletes, and which I think is consequential in a big way from the coaches about how important it was for practices and pregame and postgame to be fun. What do you think the connection is there?
Yeah, I think it was so especially evident in gymnastics compared to the gymnastics of the 80s and early 90s that we grew up with. But I think, again, if you feel good in the gym, you're gonna want to keep coming back, and you're going to want to get, I mean, you're going to get better, right? The more focused you are and having fun in the gym, you're not burning out, you're not having to take days off, you're not physically fatiguing from the exhaustion of beating yourself down. It feels good to come into the gym, and the more you come in with these good attitudes, the better you're going to get. And this isn't just in gymnastics. I was just using that as an example because it was such a stark contrast. But yeah, I think a lot more coaches and athletes are seeing the importance of having fun. Um, and I mean, you're seeing people on their warm ups laughing. They have music in their ears. They're doing a couple little dance moves while they warm up and stretch. And I think it's just so important of a way to take off a little bit of the mental pressure and to just relax your body a little bit and let it do its thing.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I feel like we kind of saw it. We just finished the Hard Knocks, which is on HBO, where they have a couple weeks that they spend with a different football team each year. This year it was the Chicago Bears, and at the end of it, they have to make cuts. So they have to trim their maybe 100 guys down to 53.
Mm-hmm.
And I think football's a great example because, like you said, sometimes we'll have coaches say, like, oh, what do you mean by fun? These kids have to work harder if they're not going to get any better, and it's all about discipline. They don't have to love it, they just have to do it. And you're like, okay, well, if you listen to these football players who are beating the holy hell out of each other and themselves every day in the attempt to make a team, before cuts, the thing that you hear from everyone is the reason why they want to make the team is because they love this sport so much and they want to keep playing it.
Yeah.
And I just think that's something that gets lost sometimes is that the reason why they're working so hard is because they love it and they keep referring to it as I want to keep playing this game that and they have fun doing it. I think that is such an important thing to bring up because like I said, running gets treated differently sometimes and we'll hear coaches say, if you're not running hard, you're not running hard enough, and if you're not, if you're having fun, you're not serious enough. What do you think like going forward is something positive that you could see in running or have seen in running that might changes that for the better, like we've seen in what you mentioned, gymnastics or in football?
Yeah. First, can I just say, um, something I want to say something that came up into my brain when you were talking
Go ahead.
is I don't think I've ever seen or felt or heard of somebody going and doing a hard speed workout at the track, a runner, and feeling like they wanted to quit the sport when they walked off the track. I think there is something so fun about accomplishing something hard and putting your body through the ringer. And so many people, I just think it's so fun to go do that speed workout, especially if you have a running group that you can do it with and you're high fiving each other and you're bent over, grabbing your knees, gasping for your last breath. And there's something so fun about that. Like we are doing the thing, right? And so I don't think I've ever seen somebody finish a speed workout or and want to quit the sport. They may joke about wanting to quit the sport, but I don't think that the working hard itself is the thing that turns us off. I think it's like that pressure of not allowing ourselves to have fun. I'm getting lost in the weeds, so we can just take this whole part out.
No, I don't think we have to take the whole part out. I think a lot of it comes down to how it's presented. And I think it's that aspect of it that you're talking about, like the joy of working hard gets robbed sometimes by how the sport is presented or how the relationship gets screwed up, where it's no longer about, like you said, trying and attempting something and doing the thing. It constantly is a test of your worth. And I think that sometimes can be what diminishes the fun completely of the sport because I think it's very easy to ruin the sport for people. And what happens is that hardest part becomes the worst part for a lot of people as a result.
Well, that brings me back to the other thing that I wanted to say about the 10K thing.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about the constant failure of me not being able to hit those times, but so much of it was about uh, having to hit something to be something. So I'm only good at running if
Mm,
I could get that certain time, that,
gotcha.
that 6 minute pace for the 10K or whatever it was. And
Yeah.
so I think that's another thing that so many of us runners do wrong is we're not going to have this worth until we can get a PR or
Yep.
until we can get into the fast group at the local running club track or until we can get win our age group, whatever that like lofty goal
Yeah.
is. Great to have the lofty goal, amazing, but you get to feel worthy and complete and a badass human even before you have achieved that goal. And even if you never achieve that goal, it's the going
Yeah.
after it that's so important. But I think that was probably the most damaging thing of my running career is to have so much attached to the results. So much of my worth was attached to if I won or didn't win, or if I PR'd or didn't PR. So I think that's one of the other things that really strips all the fun away from the running as a sport.
No, that's a great point, and I'm glad that you came back to it. All right. Well, now I'm going to put you on the spot again. Okay. So this is a kind of an open question. All right. How can you make running fun? And then in parentheses, we have obviously again, because there are people that may be thinking, yeah, I don't think running's fun, but I want to start. Tell me how to make running fun. And then you have some people that maybe, like you, during that period where it wasn't fun and you kind of drifted from the sport, they want to come back or they are running, but it stopped being fun. How can you make running fun again? So, what are some ideas for the people out there on how they can make running fun?
Well, I think you mentioned one earlier to mix it up, right? To do different types of runs, different types of workouts, different, I think, running with different people, different neighborhoods, that kind of thing. I think really important is to find wins to celebrate because, as I've mentioned many times, and it's worth repeating, if you feel good, you're going to keep coming back to it. If you're having fun, you're going to keep coming back to it. So I think that it would be valuable even every time you did a run to write down in your running log because we're keeping running logs, right?
Yes.
Yes, to write down something that you're proud of for the run, even if it's I did the damn run, didn't want to. It was an awful day at work. It was pouring rain when I got home. I was really hungry because I had to skip lunch, but I got out there and I did it. It sucked and it was slow and it was shorter than I wanted, but I did it. But always finding something to celebrate
Mm-hmm.
is going to help you have these fun accomplishments. And if you feel accomplished, you're going to keep coming back and then you're going to get better. And then that feels fun and you're going to keep coming back. It's this beautiful cycle that it's fun to kind of be in. I think those are the two main ways. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I always tell people that they got to keep a running log, and part of it is for that exact reason of it does, like you mentioned, about dealing with those voices in your head and coming up with a better alternative voice and how that is practice. I think it's the same thing of practicing celebrating your
Mm-hmm.
wins,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of size. Like you shouldn't have a size limit. Like unless it's this big, I'm not going to celebrate it or acknowledge it. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's huge. Obviously, I'm always a big proponent on the diversity of running. I also think it's important to, which I think is a way to make running fun, is this sounds so boring, but it'll lead to something fun. Running is always more fun if you're just the runner you are today, doing the run you're doing today. So by owning your fitness, you're going to make running more fun.
Yep.
And I would fall into that trap where if I wasn't as fit as I wanted to be, um, running wasn't as much fun because I would diminish what I was trying to do. If I couldn't run a certain distance, I couldn't look at it as anything other than, well, I'm not as fit as I could be. So I self-sabotage so many runs. So for me, at this stage of my life, and I wish I had it at my other stages, is just being present with who I am today as an athlete allows me to have so much more fun. So when I do charge up a hill, my first thought is, and I used to be able to do this faster, and it's not, I wish I could be faster and I will be in 6 months. It's, I'm cranking up this freaking hill. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
pretty good, you know? So owning who I am today makes it way, way, way more fun, I think. And to your
That's so
point,
important.
oh, totally, totally. Um, and then also, which has gotten me through the Portland winters, I'm going to steal your line, or I'll just borrow your line for a little bit about embracing the suck. Um, I try to flip the script on those worst days. You know, if it's really cold, I'm like, oh, I'm going out. It's going to be brutal. This is going to be terrible in the best possible way. If it's raining again, I'm just like, here we go. This is another miserable run in the rain, and I'm just going to embrace it, and I'm going to yell and argue with the rain, and that's gotten me through not just the opening parts of these runs, but it's led to some really fun runs of getting out there in a situation that initially I thought was terrible, but it actually ceased to be terrible and became actually a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think of these things as like the stories we're going to tell when we're 80. Is like,
Mhm.
when you're with a bunch of old runners at the bar and you're like, I remember this one run and the hail stuck to my eyelashes. Like, but I really do think that that's part of the fun of it is like,
Whose voice was that? Was that yours or mine that you were
that was
doing
you
right
when you're
there?
80. I would be
That's
a little,
me. Like my name is Foghorn Jones, and I remember.
I used
Yeah.
to run in the hail. But right, but like for real though, like this really hard, awful, miserable, sucky run today is going to make such a good story when you're out at the bar having burgers or around a campfire with some other runners or even at the next race, next running club, whatever it is. It's going to make a really good story. And the people you're telling it to are going to get it and they're going to think you're kind of badass. So I
Hmm.
always just kind of log those into like, this is going to make a good story someday.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I think, you don't even need to wait either. But you're right, that those are the stories that we all bring up. But I've had moments in the last couple of months where I've been on a run and I've stopped sometimes for like 30 seconds. And by the way, 30 seconds of stopping isn't going to affect your fitness whatsoever. And I've literally been on the side of the road and I've said, this sucks.
Yeah.
And I've actually kind of laughed a little bit, like nothing about this run is going right. I feel terrible. I shouldn't have had tacos for lunch. Like, and I've just like literally just acknowledged how awful
Yeah.
this run is. And I've laughed a little bit and it's made the rest of the run better. The rest of the run still sucked, but it took the stress off. I'm having a terrible run and I'm not getting any
Exactly.
better. And it was just, no, the run just sucks. The run just sucks.
Yeah.
It's like sitting in traffic. Like I can complain about sitting in traffic, or I can listen to some good music and sing to myself because I'm not getting out of
You could do
traffic.
both at the same time.
No, totally. But I'm not getting out of traffic. I got to sit
Yeah.
there. So I can either enjoy it as best as I can, even though it still sucks being in traffic, or I can just clench my teeth and spit through my mouth and glare at people
Hmm,
that are laughing at me, being, look at this dude getting so upset because he's in traffic like everyone else. So that's the other thing is just, I don't know if it's just being honest or just taking a moment to just acknowledge sometimes when it's not that much fun is going to make it a little bit more fun.
for sure.
All right. Well, anything else that you've got? Because I think we covered it personally. I think this was a fun episode too. You have any parting wisdom that you can share with us before we leave and I start, asking you and peppering you with like how can people like find you and follow you, not in weird ways, I'm talking social media
Yeah, don't
style.
creep. Don't be a creeper.
Yeah. No.
No, I think we did a good job covering it all.
All right. Now, how are
Yeah.
you going to make your next run more fun?
Good
Hmm.
question.
Like you love trails. Like I know that's like something that you do when you're like kind of at wit's end where you're like, oh, I don't know if I want to go for a run or, it's you usually head to the trails because that's kind of like your space for fun. Am I right?
Yes. You are right. You are right. And sometimes it's putting on a good true crime podcast.
Oh goodness. All right. Well, we're getting off that. I'm not a fan of those. All right. So all right. Well, coach, thank you so much. Tell me, where can people find you if they want to look for you and read your stuff, listen to your stuff, because I know that you're on social media and I know you have a thriving podcast with how many episodes does the Show Up Society podcast have at this point? Take a
Over
guess.
over 200.
Over 200 people. This is just 67. We're just a wee pup compared to the she wolf that is the Show Up Society podcast. So you've got the Show Up Society podcast. Where else can we find you?
You can find me on Instagram, and my handle is Show Up Society.
Okay.
I love saying hi in my DMs. If you want to share a fun run with me, I'm up for celebrating you on that.
How about
And
some
also,
questions? If they want to ask some questions, some
I
follow-up
love
questions.
answering questions. Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
And where else?
And I'm on the web at showupsociety.com.
All right. And I'll have all of the links in the show notes that are going to be attached to episode 67, How to Make Running Fun Again, with Mindset Performance Coach Tammy Bennett. So, Coach, thank you so much for being on the show yet again. It's been a while. I think we checked. It was March since the last time we had you on. And since I was starting to get some hate mail of when are you going to have Coach Tammy back on and everyone yelling about the Mindset Minute. Oh, you know what we should do? Let's end with a Mindset Minute here. Okay, so here's the premise, all right?
Okay.
Someone's out there on a run, and maybe it's starting to feel like, you know what? This run ain't so fun. What should they do? Starting my watch now.
Wait a minute.
No, we're in. We're already 7 seconds in. So now it's the Mindset 50.
I mean, it's not going to take a minute. It's going to be like a mindset 10 seconds. But I think if it's starting to suck and you want to make it fun, I think you should just scream out, this sucks. But maybe be careful, because then like neighbors might think that something's happening. So maybe you shouldn't do that.
And what if you're in like a busy, indoor workout place and you're on the treadmill? I mean, I think that's okay.
That's kind of hilarious.
Yeah.
I think you probably have at least one other treadmill person agree with you and high five you.
Yes, totally. Totally. Maybe a finger point. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, girl. So that kind of a thing.
How about like just, yelling out, this sucks, but I'm so proud of myself for doing it, or something like that. This sucks, but I'm getting it done.
Okay. It's just a lot. Now it's just a lot of yelling. It's just.
Oh, well, I agree. Yelling makes things fun.
Yeah. And in some ways, I'll tell you what, you'll find that your breathing actually gets a little bit better after a good yell. Oddly, it's like taking a really deep, controlled, relaxed breath.
Okay.
Yeah, it happens. Listen, you can tell a story on a run, and the second you're done telling the story and you don't have to tell the story anymore, your breathing calms down. It's because you were stressing. It's like the same thing as running a fast pace, then backing off, how good that feels. Ooh, It's the same thing. So there we go. Yeah, it was more like mindset meters. It was probably like, just a few meters there. Not a minute.
Yeah, not a minute.
All right. Well, I'm going to try to edit that catastrophe to make it sound like it made
all
sense.
That shit.
Yeah. All right. There we go. All right. Well, Coach, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you for sharing the podcast and rating the podcast and reviewing the podcast and telling everyone you know about the podcast, especially this one, because we had Coach Bennett the Grader on. And until next time, take care of yourself, take care of each other. I'll meet you on the next starting line.
Happy trails.
Thank you so much for listening to Coach Bennett's podcast today. And if you're not already following or subscribed to the podcast on whatever platform you're listening, well, I really wish you would, because it helps a lot. Also, check out the show notes, because you'll find a link to Coach Bennett's newsletter, as well as all the social media sites that I'm on. Places like Threads and Facebook and Instagram and Mastodon and YouTube, and even the artist formerly known as Twitter, whatever that dumpster fire is called today. You'll find a link to it, because I'm on there. Thank you so much again for listening, and until next time, take care of yourself.